All right, well, we're back. And again, we're in this situation where instead of being more bad than the previous week, it's just kind of on par with the previous week. And when, you set the bar so incredibly high, it almost seems like it's been good. But then you have to look at it in context, and it's actually kind of terrible. But we're here, and we're alive. And if you're listening, you are too. So that's good. So we've got the whole crew. How good is that? We got Steve and we got Craig. And we were just talking about COVID and vaccination rates and how things have been handled in blue and red counties. And it's actually a really interesting conversation.
So you should probably post that plot. Uh,
I'll put it on
that's
Ember.
a good one. Well, hold on. So let me find the tweet because
Oh, if you got a tweet,
so
that's even better.
it
I'll put the link to it.
stems. Yeah, it stems from me having a conversation with my cousin. Um, so this is what I said about that plot. Hey, look, you can clearly see when the retardation swaps political cachet. Uh, But yeah, anyway, there you can see the curve, and this is just looking at the deaths per million of population. So it's not even like a great metric for the disease progression. It's just looking at deaths overall. But it does give you a metric that you can judge things by, and you
Actually,
can
I,
see when the
I,
curves swap right through.
we need to be very, very clear. This is a 14-day moving average. This is not total deaths, right? Because that would have been an
That's per
exponential up
million
curve.
deaths per million, 14-day moving average.
Right. So that is a death rate over per like that's a per day death rate over a
Right.
14-day average. That is
Yeah.
not overall per
Well, no,
capita
you
death.
can't. Look. If the curve was tracking total deaths, then clearly in the middle of this curve we'd be resurrecting people.
Well, I just want this to be very clear when we talk
Yeah.
about this because when you sit there and you look at the first hump, the Republicans had a very low wave, and that was largely because it hadn't spread outside of the blue states, and the blue states had a crazy high wave,
Well,
and then
let's
you
be
go
clear about
into
that too. It's not that it was necessarily the blue states versus red states. It was also the fact that it hadn't spread out of the high density blue cities in the red
sure,
states too.
sure, but the second curve comes in. Where's that? It looks like end of August, and that's not an unexpected curve, but
Well,
part of the problem.
the peak of that the second peak of the red curve comes about mid to
Schools.
late August.
It looks like when schools start, right about.
Give or take. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
no, it starts the uptick before August.
That's true. That's true, but not
But anyway,
sure.
there's no way you can blame this on school starting. You'd have to
No,
blame the
I'm not.
downturn in the curve on school starting.
I'm not blaming it on anything. I'm saying that it looks like that coincides roughly about the same time that school started back up. I don't know
Oh
what
yeah,
caused
okay.
it. At the end of
It's,
the
it's
day,
it's interesting, sure.
at the end of the day, based on this curve, the highest ever achieved rate of death was in blue states, and that was at the very beginning of the pandemic. There was an
Yeah,
increase and an uptick in the later part of the summer, and we knew that was going to happen largely because the initial infection rates were in those high density blue areas, in high density blue
it
states,
spread out and then it got
and
into
then
the
it
other
spread out.
areas and people were behaving like idiots.
I don't think that's a behaving like idiots thing. I think that's just that it spread. Like that's
Well,
Part
it,
of
that's
it,
it
just.
spread because people
here's
were
the
behaving
thing.
like idiots. I mean, we have to be
Here's
honest.
the
I
thing.
mean, we had a summer
I
of
mean,
riots. So,
if you want to,
Some people needed to work and they were working in unfortunate
yeah,
positions, and some
yeah.
people needed to riot and they were unfortunately allowed to get past the abortion stage.
And maybe that's the case where what we're seeing is, but it really looks to me from this curve
Well, the
that the
George Floyd
reason
thing happened back in like May,
the
right?
reason well no it didn't kick off until June. It was like the early
And there it is.
first
So
or
about a
second,
month
yeah.
later, it starts to take off again in red areas.
But it would seem that yeah, and that's very possible that's what it is because those would have been big large events and it would have spread, and this is by state, right? And that's that you're probably right. It's
yeah,
probably
Well,
the
I
riot.
mean,
here's
as a matter of
it's
fact, you can even notice that one little
there's that
spike.
yeah,
Well, not it's not so little.
that's a notch.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about right
you
there.
could
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
Floydian
yeah.
notch, you might
That's
say.
that's That's very clear. But I mean, like to be very clear, right? As long as because I know that some Democrat looking at this would like to say, "Oh, look, the blue states did really well." That's not what we're seeing here. The red states had a much more gradual curve, which was the original idea. You know, we were trying not to saturate the system, and the blue states had a crazy high
and
spiky
the blue
curve.
states decided to fuck that up as much as possible. Yeah.
Right.
15 days to slow the spread, guys. We did it.
And I think the clear telling thing is that when we start hitting December of wait, hold on.
So yeah, ramped up
Okay,
from
yeah.
November through
No, I was
December.
thinking for whatever reason I was thinking like January.
Yeah, there's no lines in this thing. It's a shit curve. It's
This
a
is
shit
a
plot,
shitty
rather.
graph. This is like really
but
terrible.
it's a Twitter graph, so take it with a pinch of salt here. This was used in a petty dispute between cousins, so it's not like it was really a
so we see
piece of information I went for.
We see an uptick after Thanksgiving, which is expected. We knew that was coming, and that happens unilaterally. I guess the one good thing that we can say is that at least Democrats actually went out and socialized with their family, and then murdered them.
Oh man, that is painful. Oh, by the way, interesting note. Speaking of that first little notch in the blue curve, you can see another notch in the red curve just prior to the peak, that second peak there.
You don't say. I wonder if anything happened.
It's overlaid on top of the curve, but there's definitely a similar notch.
I mean, at the end of the day, what is very clear here is that the red states did better overall because they never hit that crazy high peak.
I'd say the area under the curve is actually not that dissimilar. It's a little bit higher for blue, but I bet you that the red area making up underneath there is not that far off of what's underneath that blue peak.
I don't know about that. I don't know, and I mean
more.
the other problem that you have is you also the graph ends at
like
December.
I'm not gonna crack out a ruler and figure this shit out. It looks like they're not that far off to me, but again, it easily could be that it's way off.
I mean, it's really hard for me to see a gap from 3 to 10, which is the gap that you see really early on, and then it crosses mid-July, but the difference there is 2 to 4. So you have this area from April to July, so that 3 months there where they were at their peak, it was 3 times greater, and the other one is like 2 times greater, and it never really hits those same values.
Yeah. So look,
and then they
look
match
at the
up
difference.
again.
Look at the difference between the curves. The second half of that after the crossover, it's spread out wider, like basically until December.
I see that. But
so I can see how they wouldn't be that dissimilar at that point.
Don't forget, all of the blue states had already murdered everyone they could in the nursing homes by that point. There was very few people left to kill.
This is deaths per million of population.
Yeah, so, they murdered grandma early.
With how many people actually got infected. This is just how many deaths from COVID-19 per everybody in the state. And this is the rate of new cases averaged over 14 days. So, like, it's interesting that it comes out actually this smoothly. Honestly, I think that those 2 notches are hilarious.
Well, I mean, we knew those.
I had people that were telling me before going out to riots isn't going to affect anything. It's like, are you?
No, don't bother to look at the numbers. I mean, no one behind that curtain.
We've talked extensively about vaccines and my personal difference. But there are certain things that will. So there's certain rules that I operate by that have nothing to do with what I'm told from the science and data perspective. And one of those is that if I see rampant hypocrisy, I immediately don't trust whoever's telling me the information. And that seems to be a pretty good rule. Like, you take a look at the people who are sitting there and talking about Russia for 3 years. They have a tendency to be wrong an awful lot.
Hey, I got a great one here because it's what sparked off the argument I was having earlier. What about, say, I don't know, a guy who was wrong about masks multiple times, flip-flopped his opinion back and forth, almost got to the point where everyone was joking about wearing boxes of masks, and now admits that maybe a lab leak is possible. How about a person like that?
Well,
Yeah,
that's a perfect. Well, I mean, but all of this stuff, right? There has been zero. We've talked extensively. There has been zero appropriate risk discussion, which is automatically bad. Like from a
I mean,
public
I wouldn't
policy
say that
perspective.
our risk discussion was part of was zero. I
No,
think that we covered a little bit.
we did, but I'm
yeah. No,
talking
we
about
were actually
publicly.
reasonable. The public discussion around this is
I'm
basically
talking
the
about the
world is
public
ending and the
discussion.
sky is falling, and
Right.
there's nothing you
And
can
it's
do
all
about it.
Trump's fault.
Right.
So when you turn around and
Oh man.
you have no responsible risk discussion, you have rampant hypocrisy, and the people who are trying to convince me to go take a really cool, fascinating drug that's a revolution in medicine happen to be the same people who were, just a few months before talking about how we were the virus and are overpopulated and we should be doing something about that.
Yeah, the
There's a
Georgia
lot of
Jones people.
there's a lot of red flags that get raised. But if you really want to talk about like, my order of operations, and I've told my wife this because, we're sitting here, they're trying to talk about, hey, we'll if you go get the vaccine, we'll make your life nicer. If you turn around
You
and
get a free donut.
if you come to me and you say, hey, guess what? Go take this drug. If you say, hey, I've got this really cool drug and it'll prevent you from getting sick, and all you have to do is show up and take it, then why wouldn't I do that? If you turn around and say the exact same thing and then say if you don't take it, I'm going to make your life fucking miserable. Well, that's extortion, and that's extortion. I
Yeah,
find that a form
that
of
kind
terrorism.
of makes a
I
body
don't
fall into the
negotiate with
category
terrorists.
of I'm not going to
Hold
do
on,
it anyway. Fuck yourself.
Right.
It's funny how the reverse of that sounds like the kind of extortion that people who previously had LSD must experience.
If
Because think of it like this: the government's telling you you're not allowed to have this drug that takes you completely out of your ability to perceive the world in a functional manner. And if you do end up taking it, then we're gonna imprison you and make your life hell, which is the exact reason why you're taking this shit in the first place.
I mean, I understand where that comes in, but if you come in and I go about my daily business and you
I
say
thought
that
it was
you are going to
funny.
interfere with my life unless I do something, I consider that extortion. I consider it
Uh-huh.
terrorism, and I think that there's only one solution, which is to remove the threat. Like it is not a question of me being in a position
So
where I'm
what
like,
you're saying
hey,
is
yeah,
when you pay taxes, then and you're
as
being
few as I
extorted.
can. Yep.
Oh man. You see, here's the thing
When
that
I
would
pay
make
taxes and I'm being
oh
extorted, I
yeah.
run something like what I talked about on last week's show, wherein the government finds out how little of my money, how poorly I run a business, is really what the government
Yeah.
finds out for me.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
very
fun how that
exciting.
works.
I'm gonna have a new business because I only get to write off losses for like 5 years. So this year my wife's gonna run a business, and that's just gonna be a terrible loss. I see it right now.
Oh man, you have got some of the worst luck. It's like me and
There
boating.
it is, terrible, terrible luck.
I mean, how the hell do you
Man,
find some schmuck to finance your operation? What the hell?
that's a
Yeah.
thing, I'm gonna. My wife's gonna to run her apiary business, and that means I'm gonna have to write off the shed, and I'm gonna have to write off her office space that she uses to sell her products, and I'm gonna have to write off some of the electricity and the cell phone because phone calls and all the other stuff. The internet because it's gonna be an internet-based company. The car a couple miles here, a couple miles there.
I mean, yeah,
So many.
my
My
knowledge adds
business
up.
is. Yeah, by the time you're done, the government's gonna owe me money. That's how I handle taxes.
Well, that's
Pretty
fair. I mean,
amazing.
if you're actually able to take all your individual deductions, then Godspeed, sir.
So you just
Godspeed.
gotta remember the price of creating a business is about $150 a year. Well, it's less than that.
It's not. It's completely
about
free.
that.
It is completely free to do it. All you have to do is sit there and basically 1099 yourself and collect receipts. And then you open the business on your taxes, and you don't actually have to register as a full functional business. It is it is known as
It's
I
making
think
it
it's
sound so much worse than it is.
SBA. I think what is it? It's when you are your business, so 1099s, and that's what I
Sole
had.
proprietor.
Right, sole proprietor. So I had that last year with my tech business, and every single time I bought a tool, all I had to do was make sure I used it on a job. and then that goes for a write-off. And then my
Yeah,
office
and
is
you
It
going
put
to
really
write
is
off.
that simple, though.
business
Honestly,
liquidates.
I mean, that's really all it takes to get something in your write-offs. If you're
Well, what
if you're doing
happens
it.
when your business liquidates?
Oh, there would. I mean, I've run losses for 2 years straight. There's no liquid assets. I don't know what you're talking about, liquid.
I mean, what happens to those? What happens to your tools from the hardware store?
What do you mean?
Do you auction them off? Do
I
you buy them from yourself? What
Nope,
happens?
nope. They just they're gonna have to sit in a locker because I'm not gonna sell them again. I mean, that would be just so hard. So I'm just gonna have to depreciate them. Actually, the nice part is, so everything that you write off, right now with, I think it's a section 719 or 729 or
Uh-huh.
something like that. You actually get to write off like 95% of the asset's value year
Oh
one.
my god.
So like.
That is some damage.
It is pretty great because I bought a new.
Oh god, I got this drill for $100. I guess I'm gonna have to buy it for myself for $5.
Well,
What
no,
a
you don't
shame
buy
the
it.
company
You
folded.
don't buy it. You don't buy it for yourself. You buy it for the business, right? So I bought a
No, you buy
laptop
it,
for the
no,
business.
not for
I bought a
yourself.
cell phone for the business.
Not for yourself, from yourself.
Oh yeah, but then I'd have to sit
At
there
the
and
end.
register the sales, right?
Well, yeah,
So
all
if
I have to do is write it down on a piece of paper, then photocopy it for the IRS.
That's true. That's true. I am thinking that maybe this year I'm going to run a
Just make a
gaming
list in
store.
Excel and then
I've already
sign a
got
piece of paper.
I've already got $16 in sales and a couple $100 in losses for my gaming books. So it's gonna be a tough year for me again. I think I just another business,
You are
another
such a
business
fuck up,
fails.
man.
It is. It's a terrible. But that is that's why I'm not so worried about taxes anymore. I started owing $7,300 and I ended up not.
There you go. It's interesting what you can do when you approach a problem with a creative mind.
I'm a regulatory compliance dude.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
government doesn't get
That's
any.
what it is, man.
There's
They
a
they,
lot
they
of room in between those strips of red tape.
Yep, there is.
It's-
Once you learn the ways of the red tape, you're like a spider in a web.
Yes,
You're just
a
like,
red tape web, indeed.
oh, you want
Tangle
to
up
do
other
that? I
motherfuckers
don't
in it.
want you to do that. That's how it works. You be like, oh, well, this is what we're gonna do, and then somebody sits there and says they don't want to listen to you, and you're like, oh, that's okay, and you're violating that rule, and you're violating that rule. But if you do what I say, then I don't see any violations. Amazing how that
Wow,
works.
you sound kind of like a tax man.
Indeed. You might have missed your calling, sir. You might have.
I did not. I get to do this with science, technology, and much bigger books.
Well, okay. I guess that's fair. That's fair. So yeah, I
The
guess
big
it's
books
all a
are
matter
the
of
fun
scale
part,
there.
man. Dude, the best part is, God, I went on a cruise with some friends, and I brought a copy of Perry's with me, and it was my light
So
reading.
so
at the
I
time.
I have to tell you, I understand that you got your real doll there, but like you shouldn't
Come on,
admit that to an actual woman. You should not
got-
admit that you carried
got-
Perry's on a cruise with you to an actual woman.
You gotta admit that that was
Life
that was
advice.
one of the funnier fucking moments, though, was pulling that fucker out of the suitcase onto the bed.
Yep.
We just get, no, what the hell is that? Oh, it's some light reading.
Craig, this explains so very much, and I'm so sorry.
I'm not.
That's all right. I see. The thing for me is I'm just messy. Like I'm really really messy. I'm sure I have a sneaking suspicion based on your personality and the fact the kind of engineer you are. You're a very neat and organized individual. I am not. So I have my textbooks always with me at all times.
Yeah, I've got a fair stack of those myself, so
Yep.
I am.
It makes kind of family get-togethers kind of a pain in the ass because I have my father-in-law likes to really likes to play smart. It doesn't end
and he likes to play,
right.
and that's it.
Well, it's one of those things where I'm not at the final point from a destination for my career, but I'm a smart guy. And I know I try to be as I learned the very painful way from all of those years in school that you don't whip it out. and just go to town, right? You don't drill people with how stupid they are if you want to have a polite conversation, because it usually ends
Oh,
bad.
absolutely not.
Yeah, no, I've had that experience.
Yeah.
It generally is
You
not
gotta-
taken
you gotta be nice
really
to
well.
people.
Yeah, so for those out there, right? Like I'm sure that most of us are above the genius level, which is only 130 for the IQ, right? At the end of the day, everybody sits there and thinks it's this great, wonderful fucking thing to be smart. It's not. You 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 end
No.
up you end up either you can't, if you want to be smart and you want to exercise your brain to the maximum capability that it has, you have like nobody that you can talk to.
Yep.
I'm what? I'm 4 standard deviations above the norm. A little bit more than 4 standard deviations above the norm. So that means that there is roughly about one in what is it? What's 4 sigma? 1 in 1 million, or is that one in like
I thought it was
20,000?
5 sigma.
What's that?
I thought 1 in 1 million was 5 sigma.
I can't remember. I gotta go take a look. It's you got, nobody ever sits there and includes anything other than 3 sigma. Like, why is it that they can't?
That's because none of them do anything besides bullshit statistics for a sociology degree.
Yeah, you're well. So it is 1 in 2 million is 5 sigma.
Okay.
So one in
That
four,
was
one in.
around there.
So I'm a little bit above 4 sigma. So that means it's 1 in 16,000. People are roughly equivalent to, are in the probability of the spectrum that I am dealing with. 1 in 15,000, and that is fucking miserable.
Yeah, I was explaining to a friend of mine because he was having some issues, like how, and he's in the same camp, and he's aerospace, and I was trying to explain to him, and later mechanical, like how few people there are if he's looking for an intellectual peer,
Yep.
as a partner, for example.
Yep.
Like,
I got very lucky. I
You're
got
not gonna
very
find her,
lucky.
and like even if you do, like it's you're not gonna be able to find that in your life so easily. But that doesn't mean you should get rid of your standards, because we were having that conversation.
Well,
Yeah, I
it's
kind of did myself actually, and she was a wreck, so that didn't work.
I mean,
Yeah,
at the end of the day, right? Like if you're dealing with a 4 sigma type thing, right? So this actually lists it, the approximate frequency that you'll find that is about twice in a lifetime, right? But
enough.
if you're dealing with 4 sigma, I got very lucky. My wife is she's not much less than me, like 4 IQ points less than me, which is very lucky, extremely.
And people should know that, like, IQ is not going to determine your relationship so much as your ability to be a human and interact with a partner. But it is going to be a good indicator of compatibility long term if you're going to be able to continue communicating.
My mother has a theory that you are only able to communicate successfully with an individual within 30 points of your IQ.
That's not that far off.
If you are more than 30 points apart, you simply, and it's not like you speak a different language. It's just very hard, because the person who is 30 points above is bored. Like, there is nothing that you.
Or they try to speak normally and it's just not comprehended.
Right, exactly, and that's what I used to do. I used to try to speak like what I would think was normal, and everybody thought that you were trying to show off or use big words or some shit like that.
Yeah,
Like,
it sounds like you're speaking down to them, which is bullshit.
Yeah, exactly, and that's not what it is. Yeah, I actually the last time I was at the lab, I was working for a subcontractor, and it was a terrible company. But they literally, the HR rep said, well, everybody comes in and you come in and you say that you're beating your chest and sounding like an engineer. I'm like, I am an engineer. I'm not beating my chest. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? So it actually, like, it creates a lot of problems when you are that far outside the norm. It's not this panic. Everybody goes, oh yeah, you know everything, and you're like, yes, I know everything, and that's unfortunate. You think that it's this great panacea, but at the end of the day.
You see, what you need to do is go back into college and get your PhD, and as you do so, get it beaten back out of you. So you come back out of it and go like, oh god, I don't know anything.
You know what? I'm starting to run into that. Like because I've actually dedicated my life to learning things. I
Right.
just I you know I go through all of the stuff that I'm learning, and then I go do another project and another project, and years later I come back to it. So I'm a big fan of statistics. I love statistics. I wrote I think I've linked you guys YouTube videos that I did on
You live,
statistics,
love, and lie by statistics.
right?
Sure
I love
enough.
it. I love it. And then I just went through my Greenbelt class this week and I was like, what the fuck? I forgot all of this. How is this even possible? I didn't even realize that there was this much statistics to forget. You're like, what the hell?
Oh, that's the best part because then you get to literally go back to someone
Oh,
when they say like, "Oh yeah, I bet you've forgotten more about blah 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 than this person has learned." You're like, "Actually, I think you're sadly correct, and I'm
yep.
so upset that I forgot all of that."
Yep. Well, and I remember my dad did it to me at one point. Like I was going through pre-calculus back way back when, and I handed him the book. I'm like, "Can you help me on this?" He goes,
Nope.
"No." he was an aerospace engineer, and you're like, "But
Right.
you're really good at math." He's like, "Yes, I don't know this." Like I don't use that ever.
Yeah, I started running into that in later on in my own schooling. But then I didn't, like I told you guys before, I never really got much past advanced geometries, so it wasn't
Right.
that much of an issue
But
for me.
Well, it
it,
happens to everybody in in
it
their
does.
subject
It does.
specializations. Like
It,
it's gonna happen to you if you do something long enough and you like it long enough.
yep. And it's very very weird. Like
Like I
so
can
I
go talk to an artist about which colors I should mix to make certain colors, and then try to talk to him about the color wheel and the differences and different things in there. We go back to the basics. It's like nobody gives a shit about HLS values or
yep.
HSV values. It's just give me
Well,
RGB or whatever. Give me the part on the wheel you care about, and I'll tell you whether or not it looks good.
I got I do a lot of the gamma spec. I've basically built a gamma spec program for in situ gamma measurements, right?
Right.
On site. I didn't build the technology or anything like that. All of that stuff existed. All of
All
it was
right,
approved,
Albert.
right? So all of that was all I did was pick up the ball and actually move it because
Right.
unfortunately when you work for the government, the balls are flat, they don't bounce and you're trying to,
And they all cost
dribble.
$100. Who the
And they
hell
all
pays $100 for
no
a
they
ball?
those balls are $170,000 balls that somebody put in a closet.
Okay, if you're talking about those kind of footballs, sure.
Yeah, those are very expensive balls. So I got it up and running, and we have to deal with Rad Engineering, who's the hardcore compliance people who have been doing this for decades, most of them. Like the combined experience in that group is just insane. And then Rad Health, which is our they literally measure radioisotopes for a living. And I walked in with a question to one of the Rad Health people, on the gamma spec that I was seeing, and he's like, "I don't know, I don't do that anymore."
Huh.
I have a program. It does that calculation for me.
Oh yeah, that reminds me of subnetting.
Like,
Like you
can
got to
you?
learn how to subnet, but then
Yeah.
you will
And you
never
don't ever use it because
subnet.
everybody's in the same one.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that everybody, I'm sure even normies go through that phase at some point in some phase, right? But yeah, you think it's this great panacea, and it's not. And if you're looking for somebody who's like hyper intelligent, and completely sane, like that's two things that you're asking for way too much. So
There's
it's
hope for
hard.
that.
It is. It's
I bet the one everybody can relate to eventually is I bet it's a lot like being a parent and being told you're now in charge of this thing, and then it asks all these questions like, how do you do literally everything ever?
yeah.
Like, I don't know how to walk. You just walk.
And it's like
Fucking
you're
get
asking me
after it,
how I
kid.
breathe. I do it, and then when I
So
remember that I'm doing it, I do it manually.
if you
You take in the air, push it out.
this was actually explored by a French chemist in the book White Noise as
Okay.
a yeah. I wrote a book that was so meta, or I wrote an essay on that book that was so meta that the professor asked me to explain it to him, and I was like, "Nah, if you can't
No.
understand it, then But I was forced to go
I'm
back
so
through
meta,
English class.
even this answer.
Yeah, that's
If
my.
you has to
That's the next
ask, you don't
KCD
understand.
reference, by
You're
the
not
way.
gonna get it.
What's that? You don't know the reference?
I was just saying that's the next KCD reference, by the way, for the people who are
Ah.
listening. I'm so meta that even this answer.
So the book, the premise is, and this is what's interesting is they're basically teaching everybody like how to live life, and it's very like life coachy. That's not the point of the book. The characters are doing that. It's like people. Basically he was critiquing the fact that civilization seems to have forgotten how to be civilized in
Right.
the sense, or humans have forgotten how to be human. And that's the whole premise. And then they introduce this strange chemical explosion, and it like upsets the whole balance. But when I was looking into the book to write my
That's the
essay,
balance.
yeah. So when I was looking into the book, this guy's a chemist, and niodine D is not a real compound. And so
Right.
I know that a chemist wrote about a non-real compound and how that affected society. Basically, my premise was that he was writing a story about the characters who were in a story who was, neither the readers nor the characters or anything else would know enough to know that this was not real. And that was the entire premise of the thing, and the professor didn't understand it. It was a
Well,
great essay.
you were not wrong.
So that
I
sounds like it
was
was a. That actually sounds kind of interesting.
it was I really liked the premise,
Sounds
but
very meta.
Well, it's the limit of Dunning-Kruger.
You get to a point like if you happen to be an engineer, and I'm sure Craig's done this too, where you go into your English class and you're just like, all right, how do I fuck with this asshole?
Yes.
It's the default position. You're like, oh wait, I can create symbols and themes and just randomly
Oh yeah,
spout off
don't give me
shit.
that option, man. No,
Wait, you want me?
I did this back in middle school. So you know how you have the French embedded into English, where you have certain
Oh yeah,
vowel combinations that end up just being presented as one vowel after there's like fucking 10 of them.
yep.
So I ended up talking. So me and a couple other guys had this kind of joke character named Bob. So I went ahead and started. I started writing about Bob as
What?
as
BAUXB?
you see, you're starting to get into where it goes. So I started writing about this character Bob, and we're allowed to make up names, of course, because we're writing a story about a fictional character. So Carthage was Bobbage. So you can see how the theme just kind of extended out that way. So everything had to do with Bob, and as you might expect, Bobbage was not spelled as Carthage is, and it just got worse from there. And because there are certain things that are just silent in the way that things are written with those kind of vowel extensions. The words just got longer and longer and longer until telling you to write a 4-page essay did not take very long.
Oh, that's really
That's
good,
funny.
man.
That is good. That is
just
good.
I write a 1-paragraph 5-page thing and I'm done.
Oh,
I
that's
used
classy.
to I went the other way because I was actually a good I have metamorphosized from being the goody two shoes student to being the model of compliance that I am today.
Well, I mean, you do work with a
Compliance
government
is the right word to
institution,
use.
so you kind of have to up your game.
Yeah, for those not in the know, compliance is a fantastic euphemism right there.
Yes, I am compliant. I follow all of the rules. I don't tell people why they're wrong about every rule that they follow. That's not what I do. No.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Um,
you aren't telling. You're not an educator. That's what the podcast is for here. I mean, people are learning the deep inside poop.
But I used to. I remember. I used to turn around and write essays, and I'd get pissed off because they said it's supposed to be a 5-page essay, and I used to have the 12-page paper, and you're like, how am I supposed to make this 5 pages?
Right.
It goes like I tried to sit there and normalize it to try to decrease to free up more of my time to pursue things like the female anatomy, and that's very very noble pursuit as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
But when I started taking class and going after my master's again, it came back out. The first time I had to write a paper that was 370 pages. Granted, it's only 7 pages. It was a 5-page paper. It's only 7 pages of text. 3 pages of diagrams, a whole lot of data, a bunch of tables. So I don't technically count those in the writing, but I remember when they
Sure.
used to turn around and it'd say, "Hey, write a 5-page paper," and I'd be like, how do I make this smaller?" Oh, everybody else is blowing up the text and shrinking the margins, and I'm shrinking the text and expanding the margins.
Like how close? Yeah, no, I'm a little bit too lazy to do all that, so that worked in my favor when it came to.
I
would just
discovered-
add extra shit if I did that.
I discovered at a very young age. I didn't realize this, right? But the printers don't actually print over the entire space that they say they can print. And I
Correct.
only found that out by expanding my margins all the way out to the edge of the page.
That
And
was
all of a
smart.
sudden your shit would get cut off. You're like, what the fuck? Well, because old Word, right? Like you used to be doing anything in old Word.
Oh yeah,
Right,
You
it
can
would- it
completely
didn't-
break the rules.
It did not in any way put a
That's
constraint
bullshit.
on you. I miss those days. Oh yeah, speaking of which, I need to get a Raspberry Pi. While we're doing this, I'm going to order myself a Raspberry Pi.
Indeed, you do. And
But,
I've
but
got something
they
that
hate their customers though.
What's that?
I said they hate their customers though.
I don't give a shit what they hate.
They
This is
talked
just
about goober gobbers and shit.
you could always
This
get. There's one that there's another that's comparable. That's actually really decent. It's an orange something. Let me see if I can find it.
Is it
my
orange runs better than pie?
my goal is to get it installed, but it's predominantly going to be sitting there on my Wi-Fi and running a scalping bot.
Fair enough.
Let me see. Yeah, Orange Pie.
Orange Pie.
Yeah, they're totally decent. As a matter of fact, they follow me on Twitter, which is kind of amazing. But
You know what? You know what, Craig? I think that we should go and invest in a company called Cream Pie.
oh yeah,
This would be great.
absolutely.
You know,
You could
I
fund it
think
on
that would work great.
fund it on Pi even.
Malwarebytes has blocked that site.
Probably has.
Yep.
Huh.
Orange Pie is blocked
that.
for phishing.
You don't say.
Yeah.
Interesting.
OrangePie.org is actually blocked for phishing.
That's kind of hilarious.
Interesting. And my guess is that just a difference in operating system? Is that the only thing that they did differently? Like,
Well, I mean, it's their own board. You know, it's basically just a Pi clone.
huh? That's really weird. I wonder why they're blocked.
Maybe because they're a Pi clone and the people at Pi are a lot
Because
friendlier
they're
with
fishy.
Google.
You know,
I don't know.
funny, I
Indeed
actually
reached.
got-
Oh,
I was-
weird.
I was arguing with my cousin earlier, and he asked.
Yeah, Malwarebytes
I
has
don't
it blocked.
I brought up that Facebook and I brought up that social media basically up until days ago, mentioning that the lab leak theory existed was a bannable offense. And
Oh,
he's
yes. No, it absolutely was.
God.
who's been banned for that? Like, are you shitting me? All right.
I was stunned that they when they turned around and you sat there and you saw this whole thing. Yeah, I loved making the jokes about bat soup and all that, but
Right.
the second I found out that there was a virology lab right next to the frigging the quote unquote market.
Too.
Yeah, right. As soon as you find that out, you're like, yeah, it came from the lab. It's not
Oh, yeah,
sitting
it's
there and
It's within
hypothesize-
literal walking distance. I mean, maybe
Right.
not,
This
you
is-
know.
Well, you know,
Across the
miles,
street,
but
but-
not that many.
This isn't like, and you know, it was crazy too because they were also doing the whole like it's racist to sit there and talk about bat soup or whatever, right? But like when they turn around and when as soon as you found out that the virology lab was like right down the street from the meat market there, like how is that even? I don't understand how somebody can debunk it. Knowing what I know about China, which isn't a ton, but I do know that they're very secretive. They would never admit that something leaked from a lab. So how the fuck do you debunk that hypothesis? It's the most likely one.
Oh, what
and
you
they're-
do is you get a
but-
bunch of scientists to sign on to a dumbass paper.
Oh my God, yes.
God, that was dumb. Like the fucking like, how do I understand how nature has any credibility left to spend at this point?
Oh my God. They have a Pico. They have a $4 microcontroller board. That's amazing.
Yeah, they're pretty decent actually.
I'm not going to Orange Pi.
Oh,
If
by the way,
Malware
it
Bytes,
does load in Brave, so I don't know.
I hate to tell you, if Malware Bytes blocks it, I trust Malware Bytes. I have a lifetime subscription to them, and there was a period of time where I would literally go on to Pirate Bay and find software that was directly infected to try to like pit myself against the best viruses of the period of time. And the only software that I found that was reliable from getting out of malware or what is the
I mean, like,
ransomware or any.
manufacturing.
Yeah, I broke my wife. My wife turned around and she somehow got ransomware and her thing was locked up and it said that
For fuck's sake.
the friggin' FBI was coming to her, and like I used Malwarebytes to clean everything, like everything, and it would take me at
It is
most.
good software. Like it really, really is.
It really is. So if Malwarebytes says it's no bueno, I do not have. I am so sorry, but I am so busy. I do not have the time to sit there and investigate whether Malwarebytes was wrong this one time.
Well, they are wrong more than once, but yeah, I mean they're right pretty damn often, and I will completely lean with you on that one.
Yep. Maybe it is a thing, and it's just because it's competing with Raspberry Pi. But like seriously, I don't think that Raspberry Pi.
I don't
Oh my
see how
God,
Malwarebytes
I
gets involved at
really,
that point.
I really want to get one of these Picos. This looks amazing. It plugs directly into a breadboard. That is awesome.
Remember that thing you were telling me about walking around with Perry's?
Listen.
That's what I thought.
I keep my nerd shit in my pants. It only comes out for this couple-hour period on Sunday. And the rest of it, I spend, trying to act like a normal human
Bottled up
being.
inside.
Yeah, it might not be the healthiest relationship I have.
No, bottle
but
it up. That's
goddamn
good
it.
for you. It's good. It makes
Yeah,
that inner
rock
bottle
out,
tougher
rock
and
out,
able
sure.
to hold more.
God damn.
This man over here is like Gandhi. He's holding it in.
It looks like it. So looking at this Pico, it looks like it is the same thing as an Arduino, except it is designed specifically to interface with a breadboard instead of you having to tie a breadboard into your Arduino.
And I'll go ahead and link folks to their Twitter if you want to look them up. Although if Malwarebytes doesn't like it, yeah, fair enough. But there's lots of places to order. They do make a decent product, even if their main page is kind of chintzy.
All right, let me take a look what Amazon has to say.
Well, I mean, I put you a Tom's Hardware thing in there. I mean, Tom's pretty reasonable. Although it's
Tom's
not
is
Tom
always
anymore.
a good source. Always a good source. But yeah, I just want this. This is going to be a scalping bot that I use to fish for.
But I mean, if you found the
graphics
right
cards.
thing, you found the right thing. Oh, Jesus. Good luck, man. So
That's
I
why
hear
I'm
that
going to have
NVIDIA's
something
going to be
automated.
doing. NVIDIA's apparently going to be making changes to their next line to make it less suitable for.
Yeah,
coin
yeah.
mining.
Fucking luck.
So
Yeah, somebody will
I
just
have
figure out a
like
workaround.
20 750 Ti's, and they are worth more today than what I paid for them.
Huh. So why aren't
Congrats.
you selling?
I probably will be.
That's only going up.
I haven't put any runtime on them. I built a rig and I just didn't have the time to troubleshoot it. So I got what is it? Like I think it's an M250 board or something like that. In any case, it's got 20 some odd riser slots on it. So I built an actual mining rig, and I put what the hell was that miner called? Man, see, all of these things that you learn that you're like, I forgot about that. What the fuck is it called? Oh my God, I don't even remember what my wallets were. It was a really great software. It was much nicer than your friggin' DOS file or whatever the fuck it was.
Yeah, no, kind of outside of my pay grade. I never actually bothered to do any of the mining or anything, so it's kind of too far for me to say.
Most of them are very, very simple. It's really not that hard, but there was actually something that a GUI. I think it's Awesome Miner. No, I don't want to open up Arduino. God damn it.
Like running the miner is extremely easy.
Yeah, it
Tuning
really
the miner
is.
to maximize your profit is without crashing your system constantly. That one's a bit of a PETA. If you're running a dedicated miner, it's a lot easier because it's just mining.
No,
But
and
if
speaking
you're
of
trying to
mining
run
and
it on
coin,
spares-
I should go ahead and be honest with everybody here and say I totally lost my ass on Dogecoin. I threw $31 at it. I've lost half of that value now. It's only worth like 15. What am I going to do? Oh no.
I do want to offer that this was in fact a prediction that I made 3 weeks ago, that it was a scam and it was all gonna implode. Bitcoin and Doge both. I'm not saying that Bitcoin is
down. It'll come back up. So if
I'm
you
not
have
saying
the
that it
monies,
is a scam. It is absolutely a
Well,
long-term investment.
whales
But
are taking a huge bite right now. This was
Yeah.
partly what's going on.
yeah, they really
What's
are.
They're
that?
also scared off other investors.
But that'll pass. I mean,
That
we're looking
it
at a
will
commodity
pass.
that's
It will
what it's
pass.
become, really.
But like I said, when it was sitting there at $60 and you both were arguing with me, I was turning around. I said very specifically, it is too high. It is overvalued, and right now it looks like a pump and dump.
Oh
And I
yeah,
was right.
congratulations, Elon. I mean, that was just bravo. Just man, you
Oh, I don't think
you
he
knocked
sold
it out of
out.
the park. Oh yeah, no, he's
I-
already said that. No, we're not selling a damn bit of it.
Oh,
Right.
bullshit. No. He sold out when it was 60. Then he plummeted and probably bought back in.
Very possible.
In fact, I think
No, I don't think he sold anything. I think he might have just bought in low and then he's waiting for it to go high again.
No, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure there was at least some of the rumors that I saw. Somebody actually pulled up the blockchain.
I
They
was gonna
found
say
out.
he
it
probably
looks-
actually.
Oh
based
yeah, when
on
it
the
dropped,
amount that
somebody bought a lot.
Yeah. So it looked like just before he started tweeting, right, all his shit, there was a massive sell-off. And then he tweeted his shit, it plummeted, and then there was a massive buy-in, which would happen to be the same company that bought in, and it triggered a massive rise in price.
Well, was it to the same address, or well, you see, you can't tell any of that from the
You
address.
can't tell
Was
any
to
of
the same
it.
address?
You can't. All you can tell is that there was a shitload bought and a shitload sold.
Right.
But
How it
just
happens with these. So the volume that's gonna happen with volume anyway, no matter what. The question is, was it to the same address or addresses?
Oh yeah, the real big buy-in was one individual or one organization. Okay. I mean, it was to one place.
Well, if it was one address, yeah. That's really the question.
I believe that both. They're obviously, each time a transaction is generated, it's a new address and all that shit. But I believe that just prior to him announcing it, there was actually several different accounts with significant dumps to the market just before he announced the Tesla is no longer accepting Bitcoin. Right, so there is likely to have been him plus other people in the know who dumped a shitload, and then shitload were bought once it fell. So if I do not, by no means, I've talked about. I understand why Elon makes the choices that he does. I disagree with them. I also don't necessarily know if I trust him a whole lot, but I have every suspicion that he turned around and cashed out, dumped the price of the stock because he noticed that he had the power to do that with Doge, and then bought a whole bunch more and is just waiting for it to go back up. But again, I'm going to stand by my prediction. I think it'll still fall quite a bit more. I don't think it'll go back to 6, but it wouldn't surprise me if it fell to 20.
I don't know. I mean, so remember, you gotta remember that part of the reason for the boost is the gigantic amount of capital that's been circulating.
Well, that's true. That's true.
I have my suspicions that that's going to inflate the price, because again, price not value here. I think it's going to inflate the price quite a bit, regardless of what happens. I think that otherwise, I would agree that 20 is a reasonable place to say otherwise, but I think that now it's
I
probably going to be a bit of a low ball on that.
so here's what I see. I understand that there is investor capital. I don't think that they have the ability to own enough of it that they can control the price and manipulate it as well as they
Yeah,
would
but
for
it's
other
it's
things.
not just investor capital though. It's
Sure.
general inflation. That
Which we
is
are
percolating down.
only
Like
just
it's not
starting
just
to
the
get a
gas
taste
pumps.
of.
It's not just the gas pumps. It's all the commodity stuff as well. I have a feeling that that's gonna be translating into markets like crypto, even though they're tertiaries. Like it's gonna show up.
Well, you're going to
I
see things happen in crypto like you see in precious metals.
I mean
Well,
I agree, but don't forget, right? Our previous
I don't know
prediction,
to what extent.
our
Well,
I
our
don't know to what
I'm
previous
not
extent
going to say
it will.
scale.
hold on,
I'm just saying that
hold
kind of
on,
thing.
hold
But
on.
yeah, no, please continue.
Our previous predictions were, and let's be very very clear about where we were and where we are. Our previous predictions were 6,000 from Craig and 12,000 from me, right?
Right.
And that was where we stood, and then the inflation crept in. I have bumped up my prediction to the bottom of somewhere around 20,000, and it will hold there for 6 to 12 months, which is the standard Bitcoin cycle, right? So it hits its
Sure.
bottom after it does its massive rise, and there's the massive sell-off. It hits a bottom and it holds it for 6 to 12 months, and then it starts its next rise. So I believe it'll probably go down to about 20, and that is based on my prediction of 12,000 plus an amount roughly equal to what I feel is the actual inflation value given the money supply. I think that part of the original the sell-off that we just had was because Elon Musk did a pump and dump all on his own because people have a fucking hard on for Tesla because all of these idiots with their renewable energy and batteries are fucking idiots. I think that it shouldn't have gone as
Well, they're
high as it did.
driving natural disasters is what they're doing.
Yeah, well, yes, they are, but the point is that they have a hard on for Musk because he's like this futurist, and it is what it is, right? But
Musk.
at the same time, with that having happened, I still expect a significant amount of capital to be leaving from the currently inflated price, which isn't inflated from inflation. It's inflated from the fact that a whole bunch of people have a shitload more money than they ought to, right? And so as soon as we start talking about
So they had to pay the gas bill.
as soon as the unemployment shit goes away, which I suspect it will because it's making Democrats look bad right now, right? As soon as that goes away, there will be another tank in the stock, just like what just happened as a mixture of taxes having to be paid and Elon Musk being Elon Musk and pumping and dumping.
As you do.
Yep.
But boy, I'll tell you what, that jobs report was fucking disastrous.
I have a feeling that's what drove a lot of that investor contraction.
Oh yeah, I mean, it kind of goes without saying. I mean, when you look at something like that, when you just basically drop a zero off of your actual results based on your projections.
Yeah.
Going back to cool shit. You linked us a little while ago somebody who had a really weird kind of like retro keyboard shit, and that looks to be what Raspberry Pi has implemented.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh,
I just linked that in the chat. It appears that they have produced the exact same concept in a less bulky form.
Oh, well, that's really slick.
Yeah. So
you've basically got yourself a very basic deck, man. We're getting cyberpunk more and more every day, huh?
Yep. This is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. Oh, that's actually really dope. I'm gonna put a link to that for everybody because this thing's just legitimately cool.
And it's a lot less bulky than the other version of it that we posted previously. It is for all intents and purposes the same fucking thing. It's just a lot less bulky.
Yeah, but also less cool. I mean, if we're being honest.
I suppose, but looking at something, so I used to have.
But it is pretty neat. Like if you wanted a little set-top box kind of deal, this is exactly your deal. It's just a keyboard and a mouse. and the cords that go with it. Like the thing, it's smaller than those chintzy little 3-in-1 video games you get that come in a controller. So hey, yeah, there's absolutely something to be said for one of those.
So I'm trying to open SparkFund. It looks like it is a $100 computer, which isn't bad. But honestly, a Chromebook's cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, it'll actually. I shouldn't say that. A Chromebook is. Yeah. A Chromebook is. I have gotten Chromebooks on Groupons for about this price. And I suspect it's just about as capable as a Chromebook. If you take a Chromebook, so for those of us who don't know what a Chromebook is, I actually worked with Google. I was part of their launch team for the Chromebooks. Subcontractor, not part of Google corporate. So don't. And this was before they decided to be fucking.
Don't blame him, but he gets the credit.
Yeah. Well, this was back during the era in which they still had the "Don't be evil" slogan. So you're good.
And Google was actually pretty cool. Like they throw a party. Like you go to a training and all of your neurotransmitters are drained by the end of the week because it is a fucking party for they do a solid week-long party. Luckily, because I have a tendency to get caught up in these kinds of things, I happen to find myself the biggest cynic in the entire event, and he was in my group, and it was amazing, and he was awesome because he kept me grounded. But it was amazing back then. This was pre-Trump, pre the Silicon Valley being the dipshits that Silicon Valley is. This was actually pre-Gamergate. Yeah.
Oh, so this is like pre-evil. Well, not really. I mean, they were evil, but I mean, they were like full on. Their masks were entirely on and everything.
I feel 100% that at the time that I went through Google, they were still very, very vocal in their "Don't be evil" slogan. Like we had an entire half-a-day training on why Google doesn't want to be evil and what the history of the internet was, and stuff like the Netscape versus Microsoft fiasco, which was actually like part of their ingrained training. So I firmly believe that when I worked for Google, they were good. Right.
Okay, so you got in before shit got weird.
What's that, Craig?
I said only because you worked for them.
No, I really do. I support Chromebooks. We have many that are dead. And it's not their fault. It's because I have a dog that jumps on them, or did jump on them back when he was a puppy. It's very difficult to keep 20, 30 pounds of husky puppy away from sensitive electronics when he feels he's being denied attention.
That's fair. I've certainly heard him demand it, on this very show.
Yeah, and that's him as an adult dog, a 7-year-old adult dog.
He's a needy fella, isn't he?
He is a very needy fellow. It's great when we get to so when we go to take him to the vet, we have magic drugs we get to give him. And it's the greatest thing. He's so calm and so sweet and so tired. And then they wear off.
Maybe you need to get some of those CBD jog chews.
I wish. I don't think we'll ever have CBD in our house, but yeah, $100 is a little bit pricey. But if anybody's looking for it, this would probably be the biggest problem that I've ever had with my Chromebooks is the screens. They tend to crack or break. They're not the best hardware. Something like this would actually probably be more robust than a Chromebook.
You don't have any folding parts, or
yeah, absolutely.
The less moving parts you have, the better a thing is going to function mechanically.
Yep.
And this has very few, basically just your keyboard.
Yep.
And I imagine those are probably those bubble button things.
Well, and here's the crazy part, right? So you start talking about, why, I think a lot of people probably don't know what a Raspberry Pi is. So we talked about the Pico, which is basically, it looks like an Arduino, but it plugs directly into a breadboard, which makes it amazing.
There very well might not be people that know too much about it, so why not just break it down real quick, if you wouldn't mind?
So the Raspberry Pi, there's been a rather significant movement since roughly about 2010, and that is in two different computer or automated components. One is the Arduino system, and the other one is the Raspberry Pi. Arduino is a microcontroller. So if you're looking to build a gizmo that does a thing, the Arduino is what you want to go for, and it is designed to be a $10 controller board that is programmable and interfaces directly with your computer, and you just basically learn how to code it, and it operates whatever in your environment. It is used for robots. It's used for a whole bunch of things. Man, let me tell you. So we had when I got my award for being innovative and whatever at the lab, one of the other things that was up for that was how innovative the friggin' Arduinos were. And I was like, oh my god, this is like 11-year-old technology, and you're just touting it right there. Congratulations. The second is the Raspberry Pi. And the Raspberry Pi, their mission was to produce computers as cheap as is reasonably achievable. So these things aren't, they aren't, major graphics computers, although you can build something like that. And it is designed so that it has basically the core components of a computer. I think they just started putting Wi-Fi on the chip, but it's only $45. So if you have a monitor
They're
and a
way
keyboard,
behind the Arduino Uno, aren't they?
the what?
Arduino Uno, which has a Linux coprocessor on it, so it can run its own Wi-Fi server.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's an old one too.
What is it?
YUN, Arduino
Y.
Uno. Yeah, and it's with an accent over the U, and it's whatever. But it runs. I think it runs Yellow Dog Linux on the secondary.
Really? Because I thought that Arduinos were solely microcontrollers.
Well, it's so like I said, it's a coprocessor. It's not. Let me rephrase it. It's got its own little thing that runs a Linux server on it that is not the actual microcontroller. It just can talk to it.
Got it. Okay.
It's self-contained. It's not in the Arduino itself, but it allows the Arduino to use Wi-Fi very easily.
Well, yeah, I mean the Raspberry Pi I think only started using Wi-Fi outside of their core model, right? So Raspberry
You guys
Pi.
also forgotten to mention the Intel Edison project.
I can't say I'm actually familiar with that.
I'm not familiar with the Edison.
Intel's response. It's Intel's response to Arduino, and this is, again,
these are not expensive. These are not expensive at all.
What's that? The Edison?
Yeah, no, these are slick design
I have one somewhere. I just haven't used it yet.
But it looks like the particular line was discontinued. Are they no longer working on that?
Well, I have no idea. So it was.
There's not much money in that hardware.
Well, so nobody really was buying into it because it was Intel, and everyone's like, but Intel. So Arduino was if you want a thing to do a thing specifically, and if Raspberry Pi was doing the system on a chip direction, Intel's direction was to push the Internet of Things idea, and they pushed that through their Edison platform. This thing was Edison and Tesla were the two main boards that he tried to push out, and like they ran with the same kind of GPIO attachments, I think, as the Raspberry Pi system, and they had, I think, the same pinouts as Arduino that were available. But people were, and you can use the Microsoft the Windows whatever layer, so their abstraction layer that goes over the hardware, basically the basis layer that you're not supposed to ever have to deal with. That makes the operating system hardware agnostic.
Okay.
You're able to build on top of that using the Visual Studio, etc. So it's altogether a pretty cool package. It's just that it didn't have, like, they really tried to integrate into Raspberry Pi and Arduino to make it easy to get into it, but then nobody really had like a reason to stick to it.
So and this is kind of the thing that I was mentioning before, is the Arduino is designed for things, and then the Raspberry Pi is a 45, so that's like $10, right? You can get an Arduino for like $10. A Raspberry Pi, if you want a brand new one, is like $45 for the baseline. There's usually one that's lower than that, and usually one that's higher. And then so you talk about these two things, and between the two, you have pretty much 90%, maybe 95% of all computing things covered. So for
the
me,
interesting thing is
I
like,
just want to have a cheap ass computer that I'm gonna throw in the basement. Don't worry if I get dust on it.
so what was the interesting thing about Arduino is it was an attempt to get people introduced to microcontrollers because as soon as you got past Arduino in embedded systems, like Pickaxe is huge in embedded systems. I don't know if you
My
ever dealt with
God,
Pickaxe before.
I have not.
So Pickaxe, you can run. So the interesting thing about Pickaxe is some of the processors run as cell processors. Um, and so basically, you have like say you have 8 processors, you have one as a host, and you have 7 clients that will run tasks simultaneously for the host. So you can actually get really powerful parallelism in your embedded microcontroller, your embedded application microcontroller, but without the cost of having that parallelism hamper the operation of your device. Like it's basically it's the hardware equivalent of multi-threading.
Hmm.
And so PS3 now that was run on a cell processor as well, even though they crippled it um, and ran it like a toaster oven. But the PS3 ran on a cell processor, so that allowed them to get these huge advances, huge gains in parallelism-based speed boosts, and you get away with certain graphics quirks. But then game developers came in and tried to actually use those advantages and turned it into a mini frying pan.
I see. So it didn't quite work.
Yeah, but Pickaxe is really big with embedded systems. That's definitely something to look into. Like if you're comfortable with soldering a chip onto a board, Pickaxe is gonna be huge. You should learn their IDE and their dev. Um, but Arduino is so simple to get into that
Right.
it's a lot of people that get
I
into Arduino are probably not going to necessarily leap off into embedded.
I'm gonna go with so the one thing that with Arduino, and I've thought about actually. So one of the things that I have is we raise bees, right? We do that a
Right.
lot, and there's one of this is I don't think there's a huge market in bees because it's bees. Um, but all in all, I actually think that
Well,
there
there
is a
is, but
lot
it's
of
very localized. It's in very
well,
specific areas.
so the key is can you upgrade hives, right? That's the question.
Well, sure.
And that is something that I'm currently working towards
I
as
guess
like
the
a personal
question more is
project.
how.
Well,
Um, Gentlemen,
that's
I do hate to interject because I would love to hear more about this,
Oh
but I'll
no.
have to do it later.
Yeah, if you can join us again, feel free. Otherwise, I understand you've got some home
he's got to
type
go. He's got to
family
go visit his
obligations.
real doll.
Uh,
I have I have to talk with someone and then I have to go to bed because I have shit to do in the morning.
understood, sir.
Sadly,
Been a
Do
pleasure.
you really? What do you got to do? Where are you going? You at work now?
no, I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, that's no fun.
Nope.
Have a nice evening. Sleep tight. Talk to you again soon, man.
Sleep tight.
Later, gentlemen.
Later on, man.
But in any case, so when we're starting to look at things, one of the things that I would like to get up off the ground, if I actually, so as soon as the house is not, falling apart, and I don't open up a wall or something like that and find a terrifying structural problem that, how do I make sure the rest of my house doesn't fall down while I fix it?
I've actually gotten all
Assuming,
of those now myself.
have you? They're
All
fun,
of
aren't they?
those. Oh man. The roof sucked. The roof really sucked.
I was lucky. Like I got up into my attic and I was poking around at some stuff that looked weird, and I poked my finger into it, and I was like, oh my dear God. I was afraid that they were going to come up. I have a slate roof, and I was afraid that the slate guys were going to come up and say, "Yep, we got to replace the whole thing."
Oh, slate.
Luckily,
Oh wow, yeah.
they were just able to replace a couple slates, and once that was done, the roof was sealed and the wood dried up, and it became structurally, sound again, as far
Oh,
as I can tell.
excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Slate roofs can be wonderful and they can be horrible. There's one in my town that I've driven by a couple times, and they've got a couple of the slate slats, or whatever you'd call them, and they've fallen off of there, and I can see where they hit below and the damage that it did. It's like, it's pretty bad, and they still haven't
Well,
got it repaired, too, and they really need to get that done.
so slate roofs are great in some ways and poor in others. The modern equivalent to a slate roof is probably a metal roof, but
Sure, yeah.
slate roofs last roughly about 120 years. Or actually, I think it's more than that technically. But the one thing that's really nice is if you find a guy that is a slate guy, right? We found a slate guy. There's not too many of them, and they're kind of craftsmen. Basically, a slate guy showed up when we first had our roof done, and he spent half a day on it. And he basically turned around and said that a whole bunch of other people had touched the roof that hadn't. So you get an actual skilled craftsman, and they're amazing.
Okay, I just had to come in for half a second to say that I love this picture, and I particularly like the one that has the damn cupboard
Yeah.
tattooed on.
Yeah, for anyone listening, this looks like it's from Instagram. I'm going to put this up on Imgur or something because you've got to see it. Because these tattoos are some of the cringiest I've ever seen ever.
Oh, it's horrible, but it's hilarious.
Well,
Yeah,
it goes
that's
back
going
to
up
that.
on Imgur now.
It
Alright.
goes back to that. A whole bunch of people are terrified of this fucking thing, because again, nobody actually had a rational and reasonable risk-based discussion with him. They just basically scared the shit out of him for a fucking year.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
There is
people,
something called banana pie. Nope,
banana pie?
that's
Yeah, I guess
yep,
there's a little...
not a real thing. Ignore it. Don't click on it. I'm in Micro Center because I love them. They're just so far away.
No,
I wish I had
the
a
orange
Micro
pie is
Center
a
near
real
me.
thing, and it seems decent and is fairly well received, I guess, for whatever that's worth.
But in any case, going back to what I was talking about
Yeah.
originally.
Yeah, we got
So
off on a
I
weird
want
tangent
to.
there.
See, very easy to do. I'm getting to the point where I have sufficient alcohol in me, and it's a nice relaxing night. But one of the things I've been looking into is trying to find a way to upgrade beehives. And actually, so to back this up, I want to start a company, like a legit company. As much as I have the stuff that I do, that I turn hobbies into mini businesses so that I can write them off on my taxes, aspect of companies. I'm actually looking to start something that would be external to me and my thing that would be delving into the maker space, and that's kind of what I want to dive into. And it would be covering everything from your 3D printers all the way through your forging materials and all the other stuff. Because I believe, and I mentioned this before, I think that home manufacturing is going to be the next wave of business.
I mean, that's a
In the
reasonable
future.
supposition.
It is. I believe that if you are able to sit there and take raw goods and finish them, most cases with the advancements in technology that we've had lately, the availability of microprocessors and mini computers, the cost of doing that is very, very cheap, and automating it is very, very cheap. So having people be able to sit there and produce these goods and services on their own is something that I expect to kind of happen. But when we start talking about this, or when I start looking at this, one of the first things that I've always been kind of interested in is the beekeeping, and it's more my wife's thing than mine. It really is. It's but they're really cool. Like if you don't, for those of us, for our listeners who are out there, if you are interested in keeping bees, by all means ask questions.
Oh yeah,
I'm
please
sure these
send anything
gentlemen
in to any one of us. We'll get it to whoever it needs to go to. And if
will
you're
relay
interested
it.
in like it's it's an apiary, right? That's the thing.
Yeah, it would be an apiary,
Yeah, so if
but
you're
they're
interested in that, do
they're
get a
pretty
hold of
cool.
us because that's actually I know there's got to be at least some small crossover of the prepper community that might hear this at some point. And I know that there's at least one or two preppers that do listen. So if you're interested in bees, hit us up. We'll try and help you out.
Yep. We
'Cause
actually,
they're
I mean,
a
I
great
can.
thing to have. Like, just
They
legitimately.
really are. Like if you're looking to be pro environmental, bees are a good thing to have because there's very few wild colonies left, and that's not because human beings have destroyed everything. It's because we introduced a pest as part of global trade. It's the Asiatic Varroa destructor mite that has devastated them. So if you're looking to pick up a hobby that is good for the environment and obviously produces ridiculous, you get like 90 pounds of honey per hive. It's insane. I
That's a
mean,
pretty
I have
sizable amount. Now, how
I have
frequently is this? Like per season?
so you get two honey runs per year, or two flows is what they're called.
Okay.
But you get one in June and you get one in August. We have not been able to capture the June one. So if you tend to be in the southern area of the country, you tend to get the June one. Up where we are, because we have that really long winter month, they have nothing to do but produce bees. So we tend to get a lot more swarms. And basically they go into, like, literally we had a swarm that wiped out a colony entirely because they swarmed, and then it froze again because we had these like 2 weeks of beautiful weather, and then it froze again, and then all of the bees that swarmed died, and all the bees that were inside the hive died because there weren't enough of them. But we have had multiple swarms. We are at the point where I caught a swarm actually a couple weeks ago. I was out biking and I saw one and had my wife go grab a bucket, and we grabbed them. But you get 90 pounds typically. You can count on about 90 pounds of honey per year per hive, which is a lot of honey. So
yeah, that's quite a
have
substantial amount.
from our 2019 season. So we've been doing this since about 2018, 2017, somewhere in there. From our 2019 season, I have a 3-gallon bucket of honey that I haven't even done anything with. Right? Like I have to. My wife has been encouraged. This is part of her business for the year. She has to go pour this into jars and start selling this shit because I got 3 gallons of that. I also have the harvest from 2020.
Have you considered mead?
I actually have. I have indeed.
I mean, I know you like a good beverage. That might be a good use for some of your honey.
That is on the list of projects. So the problem that I have is I have a Mr. Beer that my sister gave me, and that is the alcoholic brewing thing that I have. I haven't really started that. I have zero interest in anything plastic when it comes to microbrewing. So I need to find a stainless steel vessel that I can actually brew in. It's pretty easy to do, but I need to have time. And the biggest problem that I have is I've got 1,000 projects going on at any given time. And then apparently my social schedule gets filled because nobody can leave me alone. It's really kind of annoying, but that's separate.
Well, hey, thanks for making the time for tonight.
I do. This is my like non-productive usage time for the week. So I know that sounds terrible, but that's really what it breaks down to. Is I'm either working on my house or like today I had what is it? I cooked dinner, did D&D with a group that I did. They decided on Friday. Literally a kid came into work just to tell me that he was available to game. Oh, I did D&D this. My wife got the house cleaned, but I repaired the subfloors in the upstairs. I'm probably going to be getting the laundry and all the other stuff done. By the time you're done with everything for the week and the weekend, it just no time left. But we just haven't really had the time to dig into some of this bee stuff. But I do think that when we start talking about the bees, the microcontrollers, I want to put in something that sits there and starts taking sensory data and broadcast that so that you as an individual could walk up to your hive or walk through your apiary. We have it in our garden area to give them opportune access to flowers. But if you could walk out to your hive and you could detect where the hive status is without opening the hive. Typically, beekeepers open the hive roughly once every 2 weeks. This is
Yeah, and that does
to
some damage too, doesn't it?
It does. It does a lot of damage. So the hive, the Langstroth hive, which is what pretty much everybody uses now, is a brilliant invention. If you go back to previous paintings, what they used to do is they used to keep bees in logs, and so at the end of the season,
Oh, so you just
so
bust open the log and everything's fucked.
pretty much, so you'd screw up the entire colony. The Langstroth hive is actually not particularly old. Well, it's young in terms of societal history of the time period at which we're collecting honey, but it's not particularly old. I think it's 1800 somewhere in there, and the design has remained largely unchanged. And you still, with the Langstroth hive, have to go in and take this apart, which is for those of us in the north, down where you are. Evan, you're probably good, and certainly where Craig is, he's good. Your winters aren't particularly long, so basically they produce, like I said, 90 pounds of honey, up in addition to what they need in these northern regions per year. Every hive does that, and that's like the lower end thing. You usually get a
So this is
box,
what you
which
can
is
expect.
this is you can expect that.
Okay.
Like I said, we have 3 gallons that we haven't used from our 2019 season. Our 2020 season has filled up. We have the frames there, so it's not all honey, but we have the frames there, and it's in a 27-gallon bucket that is filled with honey frames that we have still yet to harvest and spin out the honey. So they produce a lot more than what they actually need to get through a winter, which is why we're able to do what we're able to do and use bees. But every single time you go and check on them, they tend to it does a lot of damage. You take a frame out, so they build these things in these frames, and they build sheets of wax and honey and larvae. And unfortunately, as amazing as the bees are, and as well designed as the Langstroth hive is, it is literally designed to the natural specifications of the bees. So they normally build certain things, but they also their building structure is not 100% uniform, right? It's not like an engineered structure. It's a whole bunch of insects that have this amazing ability to communicate, and
Yeah,
so
it's
every
like make
once in a
this
while they'll
hexagon and make sure it connects to this other one. And sometimes
right
that doesn't
and
necessarily fit where it's supposed
right
to.
and for the most part it's like sheets that hang down, but every once in a while the bees will build a cross between the sheets, so you pull these frames out and it breaks the entire structure up, so you could be disrupting larvae, you could be disrupting some of their honey stores. Like it's not intentional. It's not like the bees screw it up intentionally. The Langstroth hive is pretty close to their natural basis for how they normally build this stuff, because they normally build it in sheets. It's just that with any natural structure there's some random variation, and they will tie into that. What I would love to do is I'd love to put an air sampling unit in there. I'd love to do 2 things. I would like to build a smart hive that pulls an air sample and charts activity in the hive. So the key things that you want to look for is you want to look for like swarm activity. When is the hive about to swarm? Because every single swarm that you don't catch is basically a lost hive. You can reproduce. You lose almost half your hives over the winter. At least that's where we are. That's what we've consistently seen, is about half the hives die out over the winter, and then you get like 2 from each hive over the spring. In June you get 1 from almost every hive that survives the winter, and in the fall you'll get another 1 that you might be able to get. You'll get 50% of those will be strong enough that your split's actually successful.
Okay.
So if we turn around and we do the thing, what I'd love to do is I'd like to put an air sample on there and identify when I'm not sure whether it's the hormones or the CO2 or whatever, but when they're about ready to start swarming. Because when they start swarming, they produce a whole bunch of queen cells, which isn't necessarily bad, but you're going to lose about 60% of your bees, and your hive is going to reset to 0. So if you can control the swarm, A, you get a free hive out of it, and B, you also reduce the negative impacts to your honey production. So putting a microcontroller that automatically senses the air and tells you, hey, I don't know what causes the swarm. And from what I've seen in the literature, from what I've read, I haven't seen an actual thing that identifies it. You talk to beekeepers and it's like the bees are going to swarm when the bees are going to swarm. It's really artsy fartsy. And I disagree with anything artsy fartsy. Bees are idiots. They have zero intelligence. So
There is rhyme to this reason.
there is a cause to the effect that we see. That's my wife's sitting here talking about how smart the bees are. I'm like, yeah, no.
They're not doozers, they're bees.
Right, and don't get me wrong. Like, I think that there is something that causes them to make the decision to swarm. I think that it is very, very distinct as to what it may be. I think that it's going to be a key, but it's going to be something that's uniform. They have to know when their population reaches a sufficient size that they need to expand.
Well, I mean, you look at coyotes. They actually, overnight, they do a head count. And when the numbers get low, they start reproducing at rates that are more than enough to fill the losses, which often results in something like coyote swarms.
And my guess is, so there's a couple different possibilities. You have your queen pheromone. So bees communicate predominantly. The bees, when you look at like a bee antenna and you actually dig into the research, the bee antenna is like this crazy chemical super sniffer that sits there and detects everything in its relative concentration. So my guess is something's setting them off. And in order to have something that would identify that you have maximized the space for the colony, and now it's time to go colonize a new space, I don't think it would be something that would be hormone dispersal, because basically every time a bee rubs up against the queen, it rubs up against another bee, and it's that's how you disseminate the queen pheromone. Yes, it is, Robin. No, I read up on it, Robin. It is dispersal by transmission. No. In any case, something has to trigger whatever happens, whether it's CO2 or oxygen levels. Those are my key suspicions. But because ultimately every single aromatic compound that is produced every single aromatic compound that is produced is going to evaporate at a certain rate, so you wouldn't know that you fully colonized the space unless it was something that you're consuming literally as much as you're producing. So I'm thinking CO2 or O2 levels. But either way, the idea would be to put some sort of sniffer on there that would detect various compounds and try to determine when the bees are about to swarm, so that beekeepers could identify those hives, could walk out to the middle of their apiary with their phone and say, hey, hive A is about ready to swarm, and therefore it needs to be split. We got lucky this year, actually. We may have saved a queen from imminent destruction, because it looks like we had a super seizure happen. It looks like one of the queens failed. And when the queens fail, they turn to drone layers. So when queens actually lay eggs, the females of the bee species are essentially our males, right? They have two distinct chromosomes, one from the male and one from the female. And the males of the species only have the female chromosomes.
Huh.
So what ends up happening is if your queen has run out of appropriate levels of sperm, or is just failing in general, she can choose what eggs she lays, whether it's a male or a female egg. She'll start laying just straight drone, and drone is the males, and they don't do anything. They're useless, which is amazing. They basically their whole job is to grow up and fuck the queen and explode, and then that is essentially their life cycle. But that as the queens get more mature, they either run out of sperm or they get sick or whatever. They tend to switch over to not being able to produce the female eggs, which are your like the equivalent of the XY chromosome. So males ish. I don't know.
These are kind of complicated in that particular regard.
Well, it's very strange because their genetics are different than ours. So all
Well, yeah,
All
I mean, they
worker
talk with
bees are female.
pheromones almost specifically, so,
Yep.
I mean, it's pretty much about an alien organism, as you can ask for, by comparison to a hominid.
It is. It is. But at the same time, they still are amazing creatures, right? They have the ability to communicate. They have the ability to communicate how far away food sources are, and I think there's actually a dude who won a Nobel Prize from deciphering the bee language. They legitimately speak based on movement and pheromones and various other things. They communicate to other bees where they identify food sources. And there's like literally to the point of saying the sun is at X angle. They will do a dance, and it will have the sun at a specific angle to identify the direction of the sun in relation to the ground base of the hive, and the frequency with, I think it's the frequency with which they waggle, determines the distance away from the hive. And in so doing, they can actually tell other bees where food sources are. So if they've located a particularly rich nectar, what they will do is they will fly back to the hive, and then they will tell all of the other bees where it is. And that is pretty amazing for a friggin' bug. But that's what I want to figure out. I want to sit there and put in something that is an automated process, and I would do this with an Arduino, which does air sampling, determines what the actual related rates of chemical composition within that airflow is, and then would tell you the status of the hive. Ideally to determine whether it's stressed, whether it's infected with parasites, whether you have to start treating the hive so that you wouldn't have to open it and you wouldn't damage the structure of that hive.
Oh, sure,
I mean,
yeah.
because
I mean, if you could pull that off, that really would be kind of a game changer.
it would be. It would allow hives to develop pretty much naturally. And as much as going back to like COVID vaccine stuff, I am a firm believer in pursuing the natural order as best as possible until things are out of balance. And I know that sounds like hippie, but it's really not. I don't feel that artificial intervention in a natural process is inherently ideal. I think that there's times, antibiotics, right? You gotta sit there and step in sometimes, but at the same time, minimizing your impact is probably a long term. It is probably beneficial in the long term.
Well, harm
Sometimes you're
reduction
gonna
is
have to,
something that we're supposed to endeavor for in all
right.
things. So,
And that's kind of the premise is that exact thing, is that when we act, there's going to be times that we're going to have to act, but we should acknowledge that every time we act, we introduce some form of harm to a system. So the minimal interactions that we do is the better choice. And in this case, if you could identify hives up front, the ones that are about to split versus not, the ones that are stressed out from varroa or are stressed out from hive beetles, which is our biggest problem that we have. We found that Swiffer strips actually cure that, which is amazing. But that's kind of the goal. And so I wanna build a company that is based around providing solutions like building 3D printers that can build hives, because that's an ideal thing for inventory reduction.
Yeah, I mean, one of the larger printers would be well suited to printing those frames. That's about in the area of one of your not commercial sized printers.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I mean, you'd build the
Right?
box itself out of wood, but I mean, why wouldn't you build the box out of plywood or something? I mean, it's
No.
readily
I
available.
mean, I think that if you used ABS or
Oh yeah,
even
you could
any
use
one of these
anything.
other
I'm just
plastics,
saying you could use
right?
anything for that.
But you're if you start talking about it, you could easily, so the way the hives are built, you have your first two boxes, right? And your first two boxes are basically what is the hive. They colonize those two boxes and you leave them alone, and you only add on honey supers. So I could easily sit there and get to a point where if we had the ability to basically do our hive inspections remotely without actually interfering with the hive, we could determine when we needed to treat for varroa, when we needed to treat for hive beetles, or the queen needed a split, right? Whatever the case may be, we could turn around and take these hive boxes and either 3D print them or something like that. And that's kind of where I want to get to in terms of technology. And that's what I want to work towards building a company for, is that diagnostic capability and the other stuff, and that would be one use case of some of the newer technologies, such as Arduinos or Raspberry Pis or 3D printers.
Oh, sure enough. There's actually someone I've been following that's really gotten into trying to use 3D printers to build hydroponic and aquaponic solutions. And he's got some really, really innovative stuff. Goes by the Real Martian. I'll actually link you and link it in the show stuff here so that anybody that's interested can check it out. Let me see here. Let me get this guy's stuff up. And like right now, he's doing high tech stuff, but he basically built a thing called Hab One. What comments? I don't want any comments. Stupid things. All right. There we go. Right. So he built a greenhouse that was basically a fully self-sustaining ecosystem, like a terrarium, kind of.
Yep.
And he's moved on from that, but his general concept is, I want to be able to ship a Connex container anywhere in the world and feed a family of 4 every day, year round.
And I think that when we start talking about, if you want to talk about why it is that people like Craig and I get pissed off at activists and get politically involved, it's because stuff like this is a great project. Because if we can get the technology to this point, we will be able to feed everyone. Anyone.
Yeah,
anywhere.
It's one of those, it changes everything. It's like,
it changes
why don't
everything.
we go ahead and just press the damn gas pedal and just go faster because we're almost there, instead of just pulling the engine out of the machine and say, we got to build a new engine that doesn't run on gasoline. It's like,
exactly.
Yeah, we can do that,
exactly.
But we're almost to the point where we can build machines that actually do run on the sun. Or that, or run on nuclear power, for that matter, which is even more plentiful. Funny enough.
And that's the
or
thing.
I shouldn't say more plentiful. I should say its energy is more readily available to us.
We have, as a society, ducked away from. We have, as Americans, right, ducked away from our responsibility to progress all of human civilization. And instead, we've decided to focus on these internal matters of race and gender and sexuality, which in the big picture don't fucking matter. It doesn't matter what you are. Or where
it's
you
basically all
believe
bullshit and a way to divide people.
It's all bullshit. You're absolutely right. It's all bullshit. It's a way to divide people, and it doesn't change the fundamental metrics. Gay, straight, trans, I don't care. I really, really don't. I want to sit there and put food on somebody's table. I want to give the people the option to have the best life that they can achieve. And at the end of the day, when we sit there and we get caught up in, hey, did you sit there and call someone by the right pronoun? You are not achieving that goal. And that is
honestly,
the biggest
you're probably doing more harm than good to the person by using those same pronouns.
We're tying people up with useless, bureaucratic paperwork over nothing that doesn't provide a tangible benefit to them or civilization as a whole. So why do we do it?
Well, as I said, it's a great way of dividing people. And, a divided people are more easy to pick off. If you've ever seen a horror movie, society kind of works like that. You divide up your heroes and then you take them out one at a time.
I suppose that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, we just don't have a Nancy at the moment, so it is what it is. We'll get our Dream Warriors, goddammit. Yeah, that was a super deep Friday the 13th cut. What you gonna do? You got to do it every now and then. So,
yep.
You actually, we did talk about the Fauci thing. It's isn't that some shit? Isn't that some shit? Now that everybody and their fucking brother's like, I don't know. I mean, it does have those DNA inserts, and it does this and that. So maybe it did come from a laboratory. I mean, it does have that HIV marker that doesn't exist on any comparable coronavirus in nature, even relevant bat coronavirus. But beyond that, whatever. That couldn't have come from anywhere.
Well, I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Is at the end of the day, I don't understand how we got to the point where we're like, hey, yeah, this is probably purely natural. There's no fucking way, right? And the lab.
I mean, we're going
leak
at levels
hypothesis,
above and beyond the underpants gnome here for another old school cut.
it
It's like we're not even missing a step 4. We're missing like a step 5,
it,
6, 7, and 8 if you're trying to pull that bullshit.
the lab leak hypothesis covers two possibilities. One, that it is a completely natural virus that China sat there and captured but didn't properly contain. And number two is gain-of-function research in which China captured a virus, modified it, and then sat there and accidentally released it to the populace. Right? I don't understand. I still, to this day, do not understand how it is that the lab leak hypothesis got devolved into politics as a thing that you can't talk about. And
Well,
by the
because
way,
China has money and
you
pull.
want to start talking about why it is that Steve Burnett here, engineer, is not taking the vaccine. That's a perfect fucking reason. If you can't turn around and have a reasonable discussion about a feasible hypothesis, why the fuck should I believe you on your biotech research?
Well, that's fair.
I don't like, if you can't turn around and entertain the reality that this probably came from a fucking lab, why is it that I should trust you when it comes to something that you want to inject into me and modify?
Well, not only that, too,
when do you want
some
to
of these same
inject
people, too.
RNA into me?
Some of these same people, too, are the same ones that were saying in 1987, listen, the skies are going to burn up in 2007. The world's going to be flooded, and London is going to be a bog. There will be no more New York City. It'll be underwater. And, I mean, it's 2020, and all I can say is it breaks my heart to remember the day that the waves crashed over the Empire State Building and we lost to New York City to the ocean. Don't you remember so clearly that day when that happened? Because it totally happened. That time, whenever that time was, when it occurred or something.
Well, and that's kind of the thing, is that this is what we deal with. You have to deal with the consequences of not dealing with things responsibly. Is that you're going to be held to task when things don't work out so well.
Yeah. Sure enough. Oh, hey, that's a really great segue to something we covered a couple weeks back. So there was the group called the Black Hammers out in Colorado that they were looking at picking up some land, some really arid, horrible land that would basically be good for nothing other than hiking. Or maybe, I mean, it might be a good place to go and die in the desert if that's something you're into. So, you could do that. And then there was some water that they might not have even had the rights to. Turns out that they didn't even bother paying for the land before they went out and occupied it. And it also turns out they didn't buy it. So, what are you going to do? Sometimes you, forget to cross your T's and dot your I's. And sometimes you're idiots like this.
Yeah, I saw that. It looks like they had the intention of buying the land and they failed miserably.
Yeah. That's
which is
as they are wont to do, as it were.
Well, I mean, they are. And again, I know that we talked about this previously, and you get Craig on here, and this is one of the downsides that you have when you have three conservatives sitting there and talking together. We tend to laugh at this shit. But I honestly, I really did wish them the best, right? The great thing about a capitalist society is that if you want to launch your neo-Marxist cult and try to sit there and do your socialism, you're free to do so.
Please stream it, by the way, if you're going to. We
Yeah,
all want to watch
by all
this.
means.
We
By all
we
means.
we would love for you to stream this shit so that we
At-
can
at-
watch the fires.
As a capitalist, please launch your great socialist society that will supersede me, and please film it and use ad space as an alternative means of generating revenue.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. And film it on your iPhone. Of
I
course.
am all for this. You know, we sit there and we talk about this, and it's we're laughing here, but we still wish you the best, right? Like, we still hope that you succeed. I would love to see an alternative model to capitalism, not that works, right?
Yeah, that
Not
works.
because
Big
not because
asterisks
I'm
there.
not because I'm opposed to capitalism, but I'm always open to new ideas of great systems that will work, that are a completely different social paradigm. But the problem that you run into with activists here is that, and we talked about this, I think, briefly. The reason that people are successful is because they plan and they do all of this bullshit ahead of time. And the reason that people aren't successful is they don't. And it's rather unfortunate, but these people, they didn't succeed in their land purchase, and so they went off camping thinking they had it, but it looks like the organization wasn't able to secure the land purchase. And you got to wonder why. You know, I certainly wonder why. Why is it that they went off and told everybody that they were going to do this great thing and then didn't?
Yeah,
You know,
something about counting chickens or something.
Right. You know, my guess is that somebody backed out for whatever reason. But there's plenty of land in the United States that's cheap and available, and you can go build whatever you want to build on it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you know, and again, I hope they try again, and I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean that legitimately. I really do hope that this organization,
Well, I'll say I
that
mean it both legitimately and sarcastically. I would love to see their failure.
if they turn around and they were able to be successful, that would be great. But here's the truth. There have been a variety of cults that have built on land and attempted to bring about the neo-Marxist revolution, and all of them have failed. That's the reality. There's some of them that they keep kind of going, but they certainly aren't expanding because at the end of the day, they can't offer what you get from capitalism, which is relatively easy living. We complain, we whine, we bitch immensely about how terrible and awful our civilization is, and meanwhile we ignore the fact that at any time, on a minimum wage, you can, with you and your girlfriend or your roommates or whatever, can order a pizza which has more calories than our ancestors probably got in a week at any time you want.
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah. I mean, the amount of convenience that we have at our disposal is astounding. As a matter of fact, there was a really good documentary. I'll link it to you, and I'll put it in here from Windover Productions about just how amazing our supermarkets are today.
when you start talking about what it is that capitalism has achieved, it's that.
Oh, a quality of life that could only be imagined by the most privileged of individuals in positions of power. Like not even your average merchant in medieval times would be able to live a life of luxury of your average McDonald's employee.
Yep.
At least here in America.
I mean,
being honest.
and we complain for sure, because we're complaining about the fact that instead of living in a multi-bedroom house, you're living in a multi-bedroom apartment which has clean water, HVAC, and the worst case scenario is that you have to share it with 2 or 3 other people. Like, the reality is you used to have to live with we talk about the nuclear family.
Well,
and that's kind of
dwellings were the thing.
Multi-generation. You would have your grandparents, your parents, yourself, and all of your siblings with their grandparents all under one roof or in a very, very close-knit community, and we get by with 2 or 3 people that we have to share a house with. Not a bad deal.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, and well, not only that, you look at housing. You've got starter houses.
Yep.
I mean, that is a thing that's a part of normal American and generally Western European life.
Yep.
And it's just kind of a given. So yeah, let me get that. Let me find that Windover video because it's really quite good. I mean, we're not gonna like go over to watch it here, but it really does kind of quite excellently cover just how amazing it is. Let me put this in the show links for everybody first. If I can... I don't know why I have so much trouble copying things. I have to copy stuff twice. It's the weirdest. But anyway, yeah, here's the link to that. Oh, if I can put that in our chat and not some other random channel entirely. But the logistics of grocery stores are really quite astounding because if you think about it, there are things there that are, well, they're short shelf life items. Grapes. Grapes is one of the best examples. They are only able to be harvested effectively in like a couple week period, if I'm not mistaken. And that you can get them all the year at any given grocery store, even, you know, your cheapo local no-name grocery store maybe, or your local bodega. They're going to have grapes. And that's, you know, there's a reason why you see these, you know, Roman emperors and great men and all this being fed grapes, because the fact that you could get such a luxury is really...
Yep.
It's really quite telling. I mean, it's honestly a little ironic.
Pause and consider for a moment that at any point in time, you as an American citizen can walk into any grocery store anywhere at any time and buy an orange. An orange which is only produced after a certain period of time growing season. It is only produced within certain climates within the world. I mean, that is a privilege. It is an astounding privilege. You are not required to buy strawberries only when they're in season. You can buy strawberries year round.
You might pay a little more, but that's
a little bit more.
That's it.
That's it.
You might have a little bit lower selection. You might not be able to pick from the 3 different varieties of strawberries. And think about that. You have varieties of things that you'd never see.
That you'd never see. Not even a little.
I mean,
so
I can go down to one of my local grocery stores and I can get bok choy. There is no way that would have grown around here. I mean, that is a specifically Asian vegetable. But it's here now. So, you know, I guess, well, America was kind of always meant to be a melting pot, so as much as diversity can fuck everything, it can, if it's done right and tamed with, you know, as we've discussed before, if the numbers that you're supposed to use are followed, it allows for assimilation of cultures and individuals and really the, you know, overall enhancement effect, as opposed to drowning out, you know, local populations and destroying legitimately human biodiversity.
Well, I mean, that's... I mean, at the end of the day, we have an amazing society, and we complain about it immensely, which is good, right? We should always be trying to improve, but I mean, we got it pretty good. I love the fact that I can go turn on my faucet and get water.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. Clean water, no less. That's not going to give you dysentery or
parasites.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of things that you look at third world nations and they would beg for. We try to raise money for these things, and we can't even consider it as these funds that try to develop decent well water sources and purification systems for the third world, like they can't get money because we don't even understand what it's like to have to go pull water out of a pond and hope you don't die this time.
Well, not only that, too, we also can look at some of these situations and take Ethiopia as a perfect example of where these things can go completely sideways, tits up, and wrong. A
Yep.
lot of the famine and trouble in Ethiopia that we're not hearing so much about now, they've largely got a lot of that under control. And Ethiopia, funnily enough, is one of the more developing nations in Africa now. It took some time and some doing, but they're finally showing some progress. But beyond that, these stories from back when I was little of Ethiopia and all this starvation and all this famine, well, they were generally able to handle it. And what happened with this, there was a bunch of money made through this thing called Live Aid. And, well, it was millions and millions and millions of dollars. And those millions of dollars, well, unfortunately, they didn't make it to the ones that were being starved out because they weren't suffering from a famine. They were having a famine inflicted upon them because they didn't agree with the ruling regime. And so all of that money just bought a bunch more AKs and tanks and all of that. So
Didn't South Park make fun of that?
they very well might have. I'm not entirely familiar, but I mean, it's kind of perfectly emblematic of this. Or, all the money that went into the Coney 2012 crap. There was all this money that went out to find this bad man who did all these horrible things. He is a bad man. He legitimately did bad things. But, they're trying to pull up this old stuff that has long been taken care of and dealt with. Like, the man, I think, had actually suffered some pretty grave personal effects from everything that he'd done. And then after that, they just kind of made their little documentary and pocketed the rest of the money. Isn't it a funny little world? But, that being that, and it is what it is, we don't want to end things on a bad note. So we'll...
yeah, we should have left it with the bees.
Well, there's an update. So, as we all know, crypto is being traded here, there, and everywhere. And as a matter of fact, it was not 5 million in cryptocurrencies that Colonial passed over. It was something near 90 million that was paid to the hackers in the Colonial pipeline hack. So, good news, crypto friends. Business is booming. So, it's just a dip. And, well, hey, if you got a little bit extra, maybe buy a dip. But that being said, I am not a financial wizard here or any kind of certified financial wizard for that matter either. So, take that with whatever wizardly advice you like. And before we do close out, the one bit of advice I have been giving people to check out Nokia, they're doing solid. As a matter of fact, so is the other kind of meme stock, AMC. But I expect that AMC would honestly be a fairly reasonable investment now that things are starting to open back up. They're going to start doing well once they can get the business in there. And with kind of those meme bucks that they got, that gives them a good starting point, just like GameStop, which, another update there, they're $176 and change. So some of these things have kind of changed the nature of the market and the way that the people interact with it. And it looks like maybe for the better. We'll have to see how things play out from this, but fuck the hedge fund billionaires. And it's nice to see that they're a little more cagey and the market's a little bit more interesting. And also, I guess if you're interested in buying in on Dogecoin, it's about 30 cents a pop right now, so that shit's cheap. It might be a dip. But it's probably going to dip a little bit more, so, feel free to just wait it out. It's probably not going anywhere, but, keep your eyes peeled.
I don't know. Like, Dogecoin is kind of interesting because it's the closest to an actual dollar. But the problem is, I don't think, unlike Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is a deflationary asset,
Mm.
wherein you buy Bitcoins and Bitcoins become more scarce over time. So the probability is the actual value of the Bitcoin will increase.
Right. Well, being a finite resource, that's just kind of
Be a
the nature of
finite
things.
resource. I do not believe that's true for Dogecoin. I do not believe that
Well,
it is capped or
is it
anything.
not technically infinite?
I think it's technically infinite.
Now, I mean, there's some trouble to that, but I don't know the specifics, but I believe based on its own technical specifications, there can be an infinite amount if you do the work.
Right.
So,
So that's
yeah.
kind of I'm kind of like, yeah, okay.
But then again, I mean, once we get into mining asteroids, gold kind of takes on that same effect too. So
Right.
it's all relative, really. Everything to everything else. And man, that's a nice closer, right? Everything's relative. Yeah, and we ended on a good note too. Even managed to get it in at the 2 hour mark. So that's pretty dope. So again, if you've got any questions for us, especially Steve here, if you've got anything regarding beekeeping or anything, totally hit us up. I know there's one of you that was actually interested. So if you hear this, let us know if you got any ideas or questions, anything else, or anybody else checking this out. Hit any of us up. Craig at CraigBob99, Steve here at Ratman720 for all the good it will not do, and me at
Yeah,
that fake
I
guy
haven't
Dan.
logged into Twitter in weeks. I'm sorry, and but again, all of these people, please, by all means, contact these very very good folks, and relay questions to me if you have them. I think that I have a few more projects going on than any one of them at any given time, and that's not a fault or a flaw or anything. I have a tendency to get myself wrapped up in a whole bunch of shit. I just don't want to do social media anymore. I really don't. I find it to be a toxic environment, and I don't find that to be beneficial to my mental health in any way, shape, or form.
Oh yeah,
I
no,
have
it's
far
kind of
more
a hell.
things to spend my money on. Yeah, and that's really what it is. Like, I'd rather spend my money on educating myself or building a project or, improving my life. And you can get sucked into these things.
You
You can get
can.
sucked into social media for hours a day. So if you have a question, by all means, reach out to any one of these guys on anything homesteading or any project questions. Applicable engineering questions. I've actually done this stuff, so that's probably your best bet. But please, by all means, reach out to these guys. I'd love to see the contacts for at Ratman720. God knows I probably have 1,000 notifications at this point. I just have zero interest actually firing up Twitter. I wiped my phone, and it has made me a happier person because I did that.
Freeing, to be sure.
Yeah.
Like you laid down a bag of bricks. And I'll be honest. I mean, I
Yeah.
I kind of
I
do view social
useless.
media as it is in its way an exercise in Zen, because I have to be able to center myself and come back to the me that is me. Otherwise, you can get lost in it. So it's
You, you say that, but I consider it a murderoscopy. I
okay.
discover how much I want to murder everybody else around me, and I just don't find it pleasant. I don't find it entertaining. I found some great friends. I'm talking to these two guys as a result of social media. So, I can't say enough about the fact that this is a valued conversation. Obviously, I have a lot of stuff going on, and I spend my time every Sunday, or I try to spend every time. I apologize. The past couple Sundays has been a Monday, but I try to spend the time with these guys because it's worth it. But at the same time, the reality is that as time goes on, if you guys stay off of social media, I can't imagine it's a bad thing for you. Find a way to contact us. It's always a good thing.
Yeah, there's eventually going to be a website. There'll be a little bit more. I'm going to build a hub around this whole thing, but it's
Ah,
new. I've only been doing this.
hub.
There's got to be a that fake guy Dan website. There has to. I've got to make this happen. So it's just kind of part of the whole making a presence on the web. You need to
There you
do these
go.
things. But
You know,
life has been incredibly more complicated than I expected it to turn. Come say mid late November, shall we say? So I've had to readjust my entire trajectory, and that requires some rejigging, shall we say.
So oddly enough, I'm looking at Raspberry Pi things, and I'm thinking that Raspberry Pi 400 is the best way to get a Raspberry Pi 4.
Okay, that's fair. Oh, yeah, the keyboard thing, yeah. It's pretty
Yeah,
slick.
yeah. So it looks like they're sold out almost everywhere, and I believe the Raspberry Pi 400 is operating on a Raspberry Pi 4 chip, based on what I'm seeing here.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's sold out everywhere else. So that may be the only way to get it, and you get a keyboard with it. So it's about the same price as what you find on Amazon for the kits, and comes with all the other stuff that you need. And I'm just trying to find the actual specs. But yeah, just as an FYI, I am still looking at these things.
All right. And again, to anyone that's listening, hit us up with any ideas, any questions you got regarding any of our topics, any ideas for any future topics, and especially any guest ideas. I'd love to get some more folks on here. And the streaming does work. I haven't figured out how I'm going to get all the voices through one thing, but we run this through Discord, so there's a very good chance we'll be able to get everything working on Discord. I can get a few users in there, and that'd be at least one way of getting in some callers. So, again, hit us up if you'd like an invitation to the Discord to help with the background of the show, or just to chat with us or anybody related. Hit me up for that. I'd be happy to have you in here and help chat with the behind-the-scenes stuff, or just to chat. And with that being said, been an absolute pleasure. We'll talk to you all again real soon.
Have a good night.